On Tech News Today, retailers are starting to block Apple Pay. We'll tell you why. Plus, Fitbit is back with some new fitness trackers. Hungarian protesters are mad about a proposed internet tax. And Amazon announces a competitor to Google's Chromecast. All that and more coming up right now on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Monday, October 27th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by Citrix GoToAssist. GoToAssist offers a secure, cloud-based solution for IT and customer support professionals to provide live and unattended remote support to their employees and customers working from any computer or mobile device. For a 30-day free trial, visit GoToAssist.com. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. Welcome to the show. I'm Mike Elgan. And Jason Howell and Lindsey Turrentine, hello to both of you.
Hello, and Lindsey.
Hello, it's so great to see you.
It's so great to be back. I had a great time. I was in the nation of Jordan in the Middle East, and that was really, really exciting. I did a whole bunch of things that I've never done before. I rode a camel. I smoked shisha. What else? I drank all kinds of really interesting coffee.
What exactly is shisha?
Shisha is hookah, like smoking a hookah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's shisha, I think, is that the reference to the tobacco or something? I don't know. But anyway, it's big pipe, big water. Basically, it's a bong.
And a cool word, too.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun to say, shisha.
Totally is. Totally is. I always wanted to do that. But it was really fantastic. And I learned something about Middle Eastern hospitality, which is that they kill you with calories. Everybody invites you to their home, and they put out all this food, and it's kind of rude to turn any of it down, and they just, yes.
Baklava, right?
Brought some baklava.
Yeah, I'll be munching on this.
Yeah. So
how long does that keep? Can I come get some?
Yeah, a couple of weeks, actually.
Okay,
but it'll be gone.
It'll
be gone by lunchtime and around here. So we'll fax you one.
Okay, sounds great.
All right. So why don't we jump into the news? Apple Pay launched a week ago, and now a consortium of retailers is fighting the payment system with an alternative of its own. And some retailers, including drug chains CVS and Rite Aid, have even disabled NFC in their stores, blocking the use of both Apple Pay and Google Wallet. Rene Ritchie is the publisher of imore.com. Welcome, Rene Ritchie.
Hey, Mike, great to be here as always.
Thank you for joining us. Now, you wrote a really interesting piece on this. Now, the consortium that's offering an alternative to Apple Pay and Google Wallet is called Merchant Customer Exchange, and their product is called Current C. Can you tell us how Current C compares with Apple Pay?
Sure. So, I mean, it's being called a Walmart-led consortium, but that's probably because Walmart is the biggest, guerrilla retailer in the space. And what it is an app. You download it to iOS or Android, you install it on your device, and then you use it to generate or read QR codes. So the retailer would present you with a QR code, you would read it, and then you would provide the payment transaction between the app and the merchant. And this isn't a way to get around credit card fees. Credit card transaction fees can vary. American Express is a little more expensive than the others, but 1%, 2%, 3% of a transaction. And they would really rather disintermediate those and do it directly. Unfortunately, they're doing it in a way that is not exactly beneficial to customers because, one, they want you to link your bank account directly to them, and we've all seen different security breaches that have happened at retailers. And also, they want to use it to gather a lot of information about you. For example, up to and including health information, social security numbers, dates of birth. The reports vary, but the purview of what they want to collect from you ranges from interesting to startling, frankly.
So Walmart, which you mentioned, and Best Buy also say they won't accept Apple Pay. Why not? What's the problem with accepting Apple Pay, which seems like it's pretty easy for customers?
Yeah, I mean, Apple Pay is really aligned with how we spend. It's tied to our credit card, existing credit card companies, and all it is, you present your phone, you tap the Touch ID, and your transaction is done, which is incredibly efficient. But apparently part of the agreement with Currency is that they won't accept any alternate form of app-based payment for a 3-year period. There's an exclusivity period built in with tremendous, apparently tremendous fines or breach of contract provisions put in there. And because Apple Pay, turns out, it just works with NFC. You don't actually need to support Apple Pay in order for it to work. You just need functioning NFC. Their alternative, instead of just saying, well, you know, it's NFC, it's like any NFC-based card or any NFC-based transaction, is to turn off NFC to prevent the Apple Pay from working.
Currency seems blatantly anti-customer. It just seems like a huge slap in the face to customers for no reason other than, as you implied, that it's a way for retailers to get loyalty-style information without providing anything back to the customers. In other words, normally if you have a loyalty program, you say, well, if you do this, if you give us your data, we'll give you a discount, or we'll give you this, or we'll give you a free that. There's an exchange of information for some action, by the retailer. And yet this looks like they want that data for free. Is that all there is to this? They just want the data for free without having to earn it?
It's multifaceted. I worked in high-end analytics for a long time, and you don't really, loyalty is great, but any single identifier, if you can do proper market basket analysis, you can build an incredibly good customer profile. And we already know that they track us with Wi-Fi and other means. I mean, they're doing everything they can to identify us. Ben Thompson had a great piece in his daily update about how, in a way, it's a way for them to save money because they don't want to share those transaction fees with credit card companies. But at the same time, there's been evidence to suggest that if you use things like Apple Pay, it is so incredibly efficient that you end up saving money because you're processing more customers faster and you're wasting less time at the cashier or the point of sales machine. So it looks like they got in bed with this technology early on, or many retailers got in bed with this technology early on and signed a really short-sighted exclusivity deal, and now it's leading to all this tension in the marketplace.
So there are 33 retailers who are part of this consortium. Do you think that more of them will be switching off their NFC compatibility to avoid Apple Pay, or do you think this is kind of limited to a couple of retailers who are up in arms?
Well, I mean, I'm in Canada, and we have been dripping in NFC for years. NFC is accepted at Sears, at McDonald's, at almost every place I go. I can pay with an NFC-enabled credit card. There's a little Wi-Fi symbol on it. You tap it, and you're done. So the idea of turning that off, just to spite Apple Pay, means that as a customer, I lose the functionality for everything that I have. My only hope is that it becomes so expensive for them that people who have Apple Pay and Google Wallet and NFC-enabled credit cards are so upset about this that they take their business elsewhere, and the cost of not accepting Apple Pay dwarfs the cost of sticking with this sort of dodgy consortium they've put together.
Now, you're basically calling for a boycott of retailers who don't accept Apple Pay. Are you getting any support for this?
I wouldn't call it a boycott. I just really believe that, we can complain about it on Twitter, and that certainly feels good. But unless we make our choices known, unless we contact these retailers directly, unless we go, I believe that we should support retailers that support us. So if they provide me with a better customer experience, I'm going to go there. I don't want to punish CVS or Rite Aid. I'm just not going to go there because they're not providing me with a great experience. If and when they do, I'm happy to go there.
Yeah, it seems to me that I'm sure that they'll improve it. Everything in technology tends to improve it, but currency as it exists now sounds like something from the Spanish Inquisition. It's just like a throwback to an era where you're scanning QR codes and so on. And it also occurred to me that there seems to be a division of customers based on this. In other words, Apple users, iPhone users, the kind of people who have an iPhone 6 with Apple Pay are a certain demographic. They're kind of a sweet spot in the market. They tend to be younger. They tend to be more professional. They tend to make more. They tend to spend more. It's a really valuable demographic, statistically speaking. And some of the most aggressive anti-Apple Pay companies are people who have customers who are kind of outside that demographic. For example, CVS and Rite Aid are pharmaceutical companies. Older people statistically use a lot more of the pharmaceutical services across the board, not just prescription drugs, but also other products in drugstores. Stores like Walmart and so on tend to be discount stores, which are sort of a little bit outside the iPhone demographic to a certain extent. Again, generally speaking, it's making gross generalizations here, but it seems to me like there's going to be a division of the retail world with those kind of high-end stores might support Apple Pay, and the kind of low-end stores or the stores that are outside the core iPhone demographic are not going to support it, and that could be the situation indefinitely. Does that sound like a reasonable possibility to you?
Yeah, again, it sounds like that typical short-sighted thinking we get. You know, we had the Apple SIM introduced, and Verizon won't support it, and AT&T is locking it, and we have ultraviolet in media, and a lot of things that want to sort of control or seek to control the destiny. And it really is that Star Wars cliche with the tighter they squeeze their fist, the more comes spurting out on the sides. And a lot of these convenience stores, for example, Walgreens is supporting Apple Pay. They want to increase their demographic. They want to become more of a convenience-based retailer, and that implies convenience in there. And I don't think it's unreasonable. I do think it's unreasonable to turn off NFC just to prevent Apple Pay. It's sort of like saying I'm going to turn off Wi-Fi at Starbucks because I don't want you going on Google Hangouts. What they're trying to do to implement their control mechanism is far and away an overreaction to what the technology actually does. They're getting Apple Pay for free. I don't think it would be hard to make an argument that all they're doing is supporting NFC chips and they have no control over what app you're choosing to use for that.
Rene Ritchie is at imore.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at Rene Ritchie imore. And you can also watch him on MacBreak Weekly tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific and every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific on MacBreak Weekly again. Rene, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Mike. Always a pleasure.
All right. Well, in just a sec, we're going to get an update from the world of fitness trackers. But first, I want to tell you about Citrix Go to Assist. Tech support has never been more important. If you are in the IT business and you have to support users or customers or partners or whatever, you got to do it. And so you might as well do it the new way instead of the old and busted way, and that is with Citrix Go to Assist. They make managing your company's IT support much less challenging, especially when you have remote or mobile employees. Of course, you have people working from home. How do you support them? You're not going to drive to their house. You can use Citrix Go to Assist to get remote support, and this is an awesome way to do it. They use cloud-based remote support solutions that allow you and your team to solve problems faster than ever. So if you work in IT, I want you to try Go to Assist. It's app-based. There are so many options for you to choose. Sign up today for a 30-day free trial. No contract, no credit card needed. Visit gotoassist.com and click on the Try It Free button now. And after your free trial, if you go to Assist before October 31st, use the promo code GoToAssist3030 to receive 30% off the standard monthly rate. That is a great, great deal. Well, Lindsey, it looks like Fitbit is back.
Yep. Today, Fitbit formally announced some much rumored products. There are 3 new products, although it's really only kind of 2.5 new products. Fitbit announced the Fitbit Surge, which is a sports smartwatch. That's what they're calling it. The Fitbit Charge, which is basically a replacement for the Fitbit Force, which you might remember was recalled in February because it caused a bunch of rashes. And the Fitbit Charge HR, which is essentially the Charge with a heart rate monitor. Only the Charge, the plain old Charge, will be available for the holidays. However, you're going to have to wait until early 2015 for the other 2. And we're lucky because here we have to discuss the new fleet, Scott Stein. He's a senior editor for CNET and a coworker of mine, and he spent some time with these gadgets. Hey, Scott.
Hey, how are you?
Great. So tell us more about the Surge. It's, you know, in the coming iWatch era. What is this device, and why is it different or not?
Well, that's a good question. And calling it a smartwatch, I think, is maybe a bit of a misnomer. They like to call it a smartwatch, and I think it's more of a fitness watch with smart elements, meaning that you would expect it to maybe get a lot of notifications. It gets caller ID and text messages and can control music. That's about it. And there might be the possibility of more. Beyond that, it's really using that larger screen to touch and track and more easily dive into stats. And the GPS element, which is something that is in standalone fitness watches now, the price is high. It's $250. Maybe fitness watch owners see that price as reasonable. The problem is the higher you get, the closer you get to Apple Watch. And it's a similar launch window, too, which is an interesting choice.
Now, Scott, I was kind of disappointed in this launch. Essentially, as I'm perceiving it, the Fitbit Charge, which is going to be out in the fall, and it'll be the only of these 3 devices that will be available for the holiday season, is basically the Fitbit Force that doesn't cause a rash. And it may have a couple of additional features, but for the most part, it appears to be the Fitbit Force sort of redesigned for compatibility with human skin. And the Charge HR and the Surge aren't coming till next year. They seem to be pretty cool. They have heart tracking and some other features. They have sleep tracking. They seem to get pretty good battery life, but they're kind of expensive as well. Did you perceive this as in the same way? Is this a disappointing announcement?
It's very much a hold the fort and disappointing announcement because the one product this year, again, you're right, this is a replacement for something that we saw discontinued in February. And it's been a long year. So now you're looking at $130 for that, which is basically accelerometer driven. And what you really want is to pay the extra $20 more for the heart rate one. That's not coming out till early 2015. It seems like they didn't have anything ready yet, but knew they needed to announce something because the market's getting a little hot and heavy with this stuff and crowded. And Fitbit is a majority leader in the fitness tracker market based on the statistics. But how long that can stand, they need to make moves. And a lot of it now is about software. This hardware, the problem is that heart rate tracking varies depending on the device in terms of accuracy and in terms of what you're doing with it. It's not just step counting. Some places believe in different algorithms than others, some software, some hardware services. And this one tracks 24 hours a day, something that not all heart rate monitors do. In fact, the Basis Peak, there's already a Basis fitness watch that's out there. The Basis Peak, which is coming out very soon, is one of the only others that does 24-hour tracking. Some people don't believe you need to, in the heart rate market, do 24-hour tracking. But the idea here is that it would calculate your baseline heart rate while you're sleeping, but not use it for sleep tracking. So yes, it will sync to your app. How useful that is over 24 hours and how good the heart rate tracking is really what would make it useful or not.
Scott, do you think that Fitbit fans are going to give this, they're going to give it another try? I mean, a lot of people were excited about the Force. I think quite a few people bought it. Are they going to be like, okay, we'll give the Charge another try? And is Fitbit going to replace their Forces with a Charge, or have they already dealt with all of the sort of economic blowback there?
It's a very good question on the replacement. I didn't hear anything about that, but I would be hesitant to buy the Charge. If you were looking at these products at all, if you're really desperate to get a pedometer, a lot of phones already have them built in at this point, and you can get ones for as low as $50. May not be a Fitbit, but the value of that band becomes very debatable. And I think the heart rate, if they can nail that, then I think they could have a huge opportunity. I think that remains to be determined who's going to figure out heart rate and do it well. We haven't seen anyone really be phenomenally successful with that. And Apple's going to try to make headway in that too. We don't really know how. So if they can make that work, have the heart rate zones be calculated, and basically everybody needs to have a certain amount of cardio activity a week. My doctors told me, but these devices don't really help you get there as well as they could and accurately as well. So I think if they nail that, sure, $150, they could get a lot of people interested.
The existence of heart rate monitoring is kind of a banality nowadays. Samsung even has phones that do it. Lots of smartwatches do it. All the fitness trackers do it. The iWatch does it. The Apple Watch does it. Still saying iWatch after a year of saying it. But what you're saying is that the quality of that tracking is a differentiator. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. It's really a catchphrase that's being introduced right now that a lot of times doesn't really work or doesn't work as well as you think it will. We've had people at CNET look at it. Sharon Vaknin at CNET had looked at a lot of these. I've looked at a bunch of these. And first of all, some of them aren't as accurate as the bands that you would wear around your chest if you're a serious workout person, whereas pedometers pretty much work the same with some varying level of accuracy, but they count steps. The heart rate quality has a vast difference. And you look at Android Wear, a lot of times they're just giving you a ping of your heart rate, which has little to no value. The ability to track it over time and determine what your target heart rate zone is, and then how it coaches you, because just knowing your heart rate doesn't really matter. For me, my heart rate is different than your heart rate, and it means something different. So knowing what my resting heart rate is versus, my active heart rate, that's the calculation that a lot of these need to do to figure out whether you're really getting that cardio workout. I could have an elevated heart rate just because I'm not that healthy. So, having it determine what that means is really the thing that's going to help people get healthier. And there is a big gap right now, not to mention a lot of those optical trackers don't do it very accurately or very consistently.
Scott Stein writes at cnet.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at JetScott. Thank you so much for joining us, Scott Stein.
Hey, thanks.
Tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets in Hungary yesterday to voice their opposition to a proposed tax on internet usage, not purchasing, usage. Jennifer Baker is a reporter for The Register and joins us now. Welcome to you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
What is this new tax law all about, and what is the government there proposing?
Well, essentially, they already have a law in place for texts and telephone messages, so that are charged to the providers and also to individuals. And what this new law proposes is that they will tax internet service providers for every gigabyte that they transfer across their networks. They're going to charge around 150 florins per gigabyte, and that's about 60 cents.
Now, go ahead, Lindsey.
It seems like people you're obviously upset because they feel like their internet access rates are going to go up. Is there any other hidden trouble here? Is it going to be harder for small businesses and people just getting started to get their work done?
Well, I think the problem is that it has expanded out. I mean, it was not initially a protest about this internet tax, but it's kind of spiraled out into a sort of wider anti-government protest. I mean, you can see from the images, people were throwing bits of their old computers at the Fidesz, that's the ruling party HQ, and they were protesting outside the Economics Ministry as well, because they feel that there is a general clampdown on civil liberties and digital civil liberties in Hungary under Viktor Orban, who is he's quite popular, but some of his measures have been sort of seen to be clamping down on people's access to the internet. So the main organizer of the events on yesterday, he took up in front of the crowd and said that essentially the government is trying to stop us getting online. Now, I think that's probably a stretch too far, but there is certainly some evidence to say that there is a clampdown on some of the free movement of information as well in Hungary in general.
We call it a protest, but it looks like a borderline riot with people throwing stuff at the building and so on. It looks almost like looting. Now, what do the Hungarian telcos think of this plan?
Oh, they're completely against it. They really don't want to be part of managing this or involved in having to police it. One of the biggest companies in Hungary is a subsidiary of Deutsche Telekom, which is, of course, the big German and international telco provider. And they've come out and said that, look, this is going to set us back to the 1990s. You know, it's going to regress the country. And we've seen them come out and really strongly against it. I mean, they have a near monopoly in Hungary. So if they're against it, then you might as well say that every internet service provider is against it. We've also seen other people weighing in, including Neelie Kroes, who's the Digital Agenda Commissioner for the whole of the EU. And she's saying that the law is shameful and it really should be repealed altogether, which is what the protesters are asking for. They've given the government a deadline of tomorrow, or they're going to resume those, as you can say, protesting and then slight demonstrations and vandalism.
Jennifer Baker writes at theregister.co.uk, and you can follow her on Twitter at Brussels Geek. Thank you so much for joining us from Brussels. All right, take care. Well, Lindsey, it looks like Amazon's got a competitor to Google's Chromecast.
That's right. Today, Amazon quietly rolled out its own streaming stick. It's called the Fire TV Stick, much like the Fire TV box. It costs $39. It's an HDMI device that plugs into your TV like the Chromecast does. It works a little bit differently, though. Instead of pushing a third-party device experience out to your television, it streams directly, kind of like Roku's equivalent product. And like the Fire TV box, it excels at, of course, serving up Amazon content, and it's missing some major third-party apps like HBO, which is kind of a big gap. But it generally looks like it's pretty strong, and it has voice search capabilities. It's kind of an interesting product. It also works with game controllers, both Amazon and third-party game controllers. So, Mike, I'm kind of curious, with apps showing up on these sticks on pretty much every TV itself, do you think that there's still a big market for this?
It seems really saturated, and there's going to be a lot of confusion by consumers. The average consumer, the average TV viewer, isn't going to be able to tell the difference between this and the Chromecast and the Amazon TV regular product. In fact, it's still a little confusing even to those of us in the media who are covering this. For example, Amazon claims that they're not doing casting. In other words, the Google Chromecast is all about putting what's on your mobile device or your laptop up onto the TV, whereas this doesn't require that process. It gives you instant access to Netflix, Prime Instant Video, Hulu Plus, ESPN, NBA Game Time, Twitch, et cetera, et cetera. They got a long list of stuff, and they're courting developers. They're trying to cultivate an ecosystem around this product. But how are they going to communicate this to customers? How are they going to differentiate this from the Apple TV and other products? I mean, there are differences. There are clear differences, but it's not easy to convince the TV watching couch potato public what these differences really are. And I think they've got an uphill battle there.
I think they have to come up with some good examples of when you will be using this, because anybody who owns a relatively new TV that's sort of on the higher end probably already has access to certain apps. So saying, you know, this is a device for your second television or for maybe a hotel room, although it's usually very hard to get past hotel TVs, sort of sign-in systems. I think they've got to tell a story about this, because saying things like, hey, we have an extra remote. Chromecast doesn't ship with a remote, by the way, so that is kind of nice, but is that enough to differentiate it, especially when it's a little bit more expensive? It's kind of interesting to see this whole ecosystem open up.
It really is, and it's, you know, I doubt that there are a lot of consumers out there saying, what we really need is another remote. It's also interesting to see the competition between Amazon and Google. Google's recently said that Amazon is their #1 competitor. It's pretty clear that that is the case. These are the two companies that are really going after each other, and it's fascinating because Amazon, to a certain extent, feeds off the Google ecosystem. They use a forked version of Android for all their devices. And here that one of the sources of video is YouTube for this product. And so there really isn't a whole lot coming from Amazon to Google. Google doesn't really use Amazon's stuff to compete against Amazon, but Amazon definitely uses Google's stuff to compete against Google. And so that's a really weird differentiator. And Amazon's showing no signs of moving away from that model, essentially using whatever Google has given away for free as a way to beat Google at its own game. So that is a weird and interesting development. And of course, one other element of this is that Amazon very clearly targets children in its content. They do probably a better job than anyone of providing really compelling solutions for parents and children, so that kids can, parents can just turn their kids loose on Amazon content and watch all kinds of stuff, pick their own stuff within a parental filter enabled system, and this will support it as well. They're going to support PBS Kids, Watch Disney Channel, and other children's programs. So again, that's a big differentiator for Amazon that's kind of off the radar of the sort of geek press. We don't really talk enough about that, but that is a huge marketing advantage for Amazon.
Yeah, particularly actually a neighbor of mine they have a couple of kids, and in each kid's room is a TV. It's not hooked up to cable, but it has a Chromecast. The problem with that is that the kids don't have a phone to control the Chromecast with. Here, that's kind of a solution. It's a low-cost entry for people who have cut the cord to give their kids access to content in an easier way. Maybe that's one benefit, I suppose.
Well, and these kids they're loyal. I mean, both of my kids have Kindle Fires that they're essentially their portal to the internet. And like you said, it's a pretty locked down portal to the internet, but they really, they rely on Amazon and they identify with it. And Amazon does seem to be setting itself up to take advantage of that over time, even if it's not really competing very effectively against Google when it comes to hardware development. It has won in a couple of really important small spaces, including the tablet, I think.
Yeah. Well, in other Amazon news, Amazon today launched a crowdsourced publishing site called Kindle Scout. Visitors to the site can read unpublished submissions and nominate the ones they like. And if a book gets enough nominations, Amazon will publish it via Kindle Press and give the author a $1,500 advance, a 50% ebook royalty, and free marketing on the Kindle store. Just when I try to stay mad at Amazon, they come up with something like this. Obviously, crowdsourcing publishing, the discovery of new authors, seems to me like just a fantastic thing. What do you think, Lindsey?
Yeah, absolutely. This makes me think of when I was in college, I was an intern at The Atlantic, before The Atlantic was much of an online publication, obviously. And my job and all the interns' job was to sort through what we called the slush, which was the unsolicited manuscript pile. And it was up to us to choose the ones that we liked and write up a little paragraph and pass it along to the higher-ups who we were very afraid of at the time in the editorial landscape at The Atlantic. And when you think about that, how much better, honestly, is a system that will let lots of people look through the slush and raise things up for voting rather than rely on, some maybe smart but still very young 19-year-olds to surface those decisions. So I like it a lot. I think it's really cool.
Once upon a time, the publishing industry used to exist precisely to discover talent. The way it worked was that if you were a young writer and you wanted to become a famous professional writer, you would you'd write a book proposal and you'd send it to agents. You try to get an agent, or you'd send it to publishers. Typical scenarios: you get an agent who would read your stuff and say, "Wow, this kid's got it. I've seen him come, I've seen him go, and this kid's really got it." And then they would go and negotiate on your behalf with the publishing company, and through this sort of bizarre, long, drawn-out process, new writers would be discovered. Well, the publishing industry hasn't really been able to do that very well recently. Now they're all about platforms. So if you're Snooki or somebody with a platform, some famous person, famous for any reason, no matter what it is, you can get published. But if you're a great writer without a platform, without a TV show, without a huge social media following or whatever, you can't get published. And so there's this huge problem in the industry which Amazon hadn't solved before. Amazon's old system, or their existing options for writers, have been something of a free-for-all. You can go and you can get your book edited, you can get it designed through Amazon, you can write it, submit it, publish it as an ebook, and it just becomes one of a gazillion different books, undifferentiated, and the readers have a very difficult time understanding which are the good ones, which are the bad ones, and how do you really discover these new books, and how do you really take great talent and make them famous, right?
Now,
So
I think there's one dark cloud here, and it's going to sound really snobby, but when you open things up to, I feel like there's still no solution for the really avant-garde writer, somebody who's trying something totally new, who maybe you haven't seen before, and it's not 50 Shades of Grey, and it's not something that is cleverly targeted at a niche audience that will give it rave reviews. That still, when you send something out for evaluation by the masses, it may fall through the cracks because it just can't get the attention it needs, to really push boundaries of art. I think that's still a big challenge for everybody because economics often ignore those kinds of artists. And so I'd love to see a solution for that, but I haven't thought of it yet.
That's a great point, but I'm given hope by the quality of Amazon reviews for already published books. There's some great stuff out there. There's a lot of passion within the book reading world for even obscure titles, and people, could theoretically, rally around obscure categories of content and art, as you say. There's also an element where you could game this. Somebody like Robert Scoble with a huge social media following could just get all kinds of positive reviews just by the sheer power of his social media following. And that isn't necessarily the best way to go either. So, we'll have to wait and see what the result is of this and see if actually high-quality content gets published through this system. But I have to admit, the idea of crowdsourcing the discovery of literary talent it gives me hope, because right now there's really nothing else. So.
I can't wait to see what happens. Yeah, I'm excited to see.
Well, we got an email from Terry in Amarillo, Texas about Dropbox's pricing model, and he wrote, TNT Gang, I received an amazing offer from Dropbox for the new, more powerful Dropbox Pro for $99 per year for 1 terabyte of storage. I get the same amount of storage from Google and Microsoft for a grand total of free. Am I missing something important here? I've used Dropbox with the free 2 gigabyte for a long time, and the common folder on all my devices is nice, but not $99 a year nice. Are there other features that make Dropbox a good deal, or are they grabbing what money they can while they can? Love the news podcast. Keep up the great work. Well, thank you so much for that, Terry in Amarillo, Texas. My only comment on that is essentially that Dropbox is more easy to use and more cross-platform. So, for example, Google Drive and Microsoft OneDrive support Windows, Mac, Android, and iOS. Those 4. Each of them supports those 4. Dropbox supports those 4, plus Linux, BlackBerry, and Kindle Fire. So if you're on BlackBerry or Kindle Fire, or you have a Linux device, Dropbox is it's the only thing that's going to allow you to have that sort of cross-platform compatibility. It's also, some people like the user interface, the ease of use, the reliability, and so on. Of course, Google Drive, in my experience, is pretty reliable, although this morning it was having some problems. But that's really some of the main things. And one other benefit of Dropbox is if you use Mailbox, which is an app that Dropbox acquired, that requires integration with Dropbox. So you basically have to use Dropbox if you're going to take advantage of all the features of the Mailbox email app. So those are the only things that I can think of. Jason and Lindsey, you guys, can you think of any reason why anybody would want to pay $99 a year for a terabyte of Dropbox storage?
If you feel like their security is superior, which I doubt that it actually is, that might be a reason.
Yeah, I feel like the reason I continue using Dropbox, even though I have all this insane amount of storage on Drive, is its kind of no-brainer approach to kind of drop something in this folder and suddenly, boom, it's there, synced to everything else. Maybe Drive even works like that. And if it does work like that, and I haven't spent the time to look into it, that's something too, right? Like, why am I still choosing to use Dropbox if there are other alternatives? I don't know if I'd pay $100 a year for it, though. It's really hard to shell out, $100, 3 digits versus free. Convenience, you can work around those kind of issues,
Yeah, and the cost of that kind of cloud storage keeps dropping, so I'm not sure how long they'll be able to maintain that price point with everybody else just the floor coming out from under the pricing. So we'll see how they do with that. But we do thank Terry for that email. Well, in a couple of follow-ups, Whisper was recently accused by the Guardian newspaper of violating the privacy of users. The paper reported that Whisper shared user data with the Pentagon and tracked newsworthy Whisper users in order to get scoops on famous people and some other transgressions. Whisper CEO Michael Hayward denied everything and slammed the paper, but now Recode has learned that some Whisper employees have been suspended over the controversy and that editor-in-chief Nathan Zimmerman is among those suspended. Well, we've been keeping you up to date on the on-again, off-again closure of TwitPic, which first announced their own demise after a trademark dispute with Twitter itself. Then they said they had a buyer and wouldn't shut down. And more than a week ago, they said, no, they're going to shut down after all. Today, I can report what may be the final chapter in this company's tragic history. The company announced an agreement with Twitter for Twitter to take ownership of both the TwitPic website and photo archive. Note that this arrangement is only for old pictures already posted. New ones are not being accepted by the service. In other news, Samsung's $3,700 induction range stove doesn't cook with gas and it doesn't have flames. So Samsung is using blue LEDs around the edges of the burners to create the illusion of flames. The higher the real heat is, the higher the fake flames are. And if you're looking at the video version of this netcast, you can see that it's vaguely convincing and a little cheesy, I think.
Well, you know what's interesting? When we had this on CNET running for a couple of days, it did bananas traffic. People were really interested in this concept, at the very least, just because I think it just looks so interesting.
Yeah. It's like those fake candles that kind of flicker, and it's a sort of, it gives you the illusion that you have like the original thing, but you actually have a digital kind of fake thing.
Or I think it does actually serve to show you that it's working.
Right.
I've had this experience with inductive cooktops that if you use the wrong kind of pan, it just simply doesn't work, and it takes a while to figure out why, because you can't see anything happening. I think there is that human need to see this digital, they need to see the response. This thing is on. And it helps a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of like adding noise to an electric car so that people that are walking on the street actually know that there's a car approaching, because they can be really quiet.
Exactly.
Well, Apple's autocorrect spoiled a demo of an app called Replay during Apple's recent announcement. One of the demo guys typed in Utah road trip, and autocorrect changed it to It's road trip. But now when you watch the presentation on the Apple website or via the Apple TV app, you can see that Apple's engaged in some Soviet-style historical revisionism, making it appear as if autocorrect was actually correct. Nice going, Apple. Their perfectionism knows no bounds, even changing history. Well, Lindsey Turrentine, I want to thank you for doing the show last Monday with Leo. That was probably a lot of fun. Leo is a great person. I've been a guest on shows that he's hosted, no matter what it is, and that's a lot of fun. But I want to thank you for doing that then and doing today's show today, and for being here every single Monday. It's awesome when you're on the show.
Thank you. Fun as always. And it was fun last week. We had a great time.
I bet you did. It looked like a great show. And by the way, I'd like to thank both Leo and Sarah for doing the show last week. They are incredibly busy people. They have more shows than anybody else here at Twit. And for them to take on TNT, which looks easy, but it's actually a time-consuming show to do. And I'd also like to thank Tanya Hall as well. So again, Lindsey, thank you again for this, and we will see you next Monday.
Alrighty. See you soon.
All right. Well, you can subscribe to Tech News Today on Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, Feedly, RSS, so many options. Just go to twit.tv/TNT and choose your favorite way to subscribe. You can also follow us on Twitter at Tech News Today TV. And please send us your thoughts and opinions. Send email to tnt@twit.tv or leave voicemail at 260-TNT-SHOW. Don't miss our evening newscast, Tech News Tonight, at 4 p.m. Pacific, tonight and every weeknight right here on the Twit Network. My name is Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow.